Welcome back to another episode of When We're Not Hustling the After Party. Today we are talking about Kaytlin Bailey, and I am joined with my two of my favorite co-hosts.
I'm Emily Foster. I'm the producer. I'm the one that reminds you to like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff.
And I am Milk Glass. You can find me on socials at that name with one S. I am a sex worker and kink practitioner in the Pittsburgh area, and I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you here too. So Kaytlin has been a long time um, comrade of mine. Like we've both been working in the podcasting, sex working, activist space for the last as long as I can remember, 10 years. And we've overlapped, we've co-hosted episodes to get not like we've collaborated on episodes that came out on both of our shows several times. So we've known each other for a while, and even at the beginning of this show, Emily and I reached out to Kaytlin and was like, "What do you think of our idea?" And Kaytlin, I have to say, really did help us hone in on the messaging of what we wanted to accomplish in this show. And so I feel a lot of gratitude towards her. But part of it is that she's just very smart. Very, very smart. And I'll give her credit because we said that to her when we were talking to her, and she's like, I don't remember what I said to you guys at all. But we remember because what
We remember because it mattered.
yeah,
Yeah.
because what
No,
we
she pushed back and said, you need to be careful. She didn't say we were doing it, but she said, you need to be careful that you're not trying to say we're legitimate people because we do something other than sex work.
Mhm.
Like, I don't want you to make some like, oh, it's fine that I do this stuff because I have this stuff, like show. And it was,
art or the service of writing or the service of like the volunteer work that I do or whatever. But she was like, no, it's like legitimate just to be a sex worker. And we were
it's
like,
legitimate just to be a sex worker. That's a job. It's okay to just do that. And like,
and of course it is. And we
obviously that wasn't the intention. And obviously we didn't, but she was actually, I mean, I think that was the germination of the idea that eventually became, and what does sex work allow us to do?
yeah.
What does the freedom of sex work allow us to do? And that is such a powerful line. I mean, every time I hear it, I'm like, yeah, no, glad we got that pushback. you know?
Us to shape how we were thinking about the show. And of course, we weren't coming from the place of like, and sex workers should justify themselves with all the other cool things that they're doing.
Right.
Um, but like hearing somebody say that they could listen to it and think that made it really like important for us that we like
We're like,
are
we need to draw this line. Like,
not what we're saying. We just happen to know a lot of sex workers and
right.
like badass
They're
people,
really interesting
all kinds of
people.
cool things. And I want to talk about them, and so that was really helpful. Yeah. But also, so that was kind of how so even though we're toward the end right now of season two, and this is the first time she's been on, she really did help us to shape the show.
Mhm. And I will
Yeah.
say, some of the best comedians I know are the smartest people. Like,
Oh,
you
yeah.
don't write good, clever comedy without having like a real story and the drive to like tell it in a very specific way through
And
comedy.
concise. Concise, like concision is something that I think comedians are good at that I really appreciate.
And timing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like, I always just, oh, the timing of things, the beats, when they're talking. Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
only thing
Well,
better, I guess, would be a rapper, but,
I mean, I
then you
have,
have to listen to rap.
oh, I love rap. What?
I adore rap. I listen to rap and hip hop all the time. I just,
I do.
I'm teasing rappers in general. Don't come at me.
Not. But like, yeah, PJ's funny because PJ's always like, PJ tells me that the music that I listen to, which is rap and hip hop, is very, and these are PJ's words. I love PJ. PJ's like, I have a hard time listening to your music because it's very cognitively demanding.
Interesting. I
Is
find it so rhythmically soothing, and
actually the
the
point
aggression
I'm making
is
because so much
relaxing.
like social commentary and very smart.
Yeah.
Like, and so they're like, yeah, but it's too much, it's too many words. Like I So I can't.
Oh, gotcha, gotcha. Yeah, I love that shit. I'm so bored with slow lyrics. Like, I love following it all.
Anyways, yeah. So Kaytlin has I've been twice to her show. It's really good. It's very interesting. Um, it's very interesting because it's both funny and very serious, like at the same time, which is what I think most comedians are doing, right? And she talks about becoming a sex worker at 17 and her dad joining the military at 17 and how he's seen as a hero and she's seen as a whore. And the PTSD that she knows her father as this like military war hero has and watched him have. And she was talking about the fact that he died because of Agent Orange like things how like and how that is somehow seen and how sex work is somehow seen as this traumatizing thing that like she just juxtaposes those things but also goes through the entire like whatever 900-year history of like sex work or 1,000 years or whatever to show like how the misogyny shapes the fact that like her dad is seen as a hero and she's seen as a failure, and which is how sex workers are seen, and you notice that anytime you hear people talk about like, well, if this doesn't work out, I'll just be a stripper. And like, yeah, good luck.
Right? It's not easy to be a stripper and to make good money. You have no idea.
Right. But it's like seen as like that's what you do if you can't manage to do anything else,
Right.
And actually like yeah, so I mean it's a very, very interesting show. Um and I appreciate the work that she's doing. And she went on a world tour. And what's even more interesting about this is that she set a goal. She told us in the podcast she didn't make the goal, but like she set this goal of boxing in every city that she did this show. She is a tiny woman.
Mhm.
I know how tiny she is, not just because I know her, but because one time PJ did a photo shoot of her and it was impromptu, so she didn't have anything. So I gave her a corset of mine, and even tying it as tight as you can, I stuck towels from the hotel in the back of the corset so it looked like it fit her. She's a tiny woman boxing her way around the world.
It's but my brother was a boxer before his neck injury, and it's wild. Boxing is it's just something that is so different, especially like she trained in Muay Thai. It's like boxers are actually very small, slight, agile. Like you need to be able to like move, and the bigger you are, the bigger the target. Like
That's
literally.
true. Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm. And boxing's all by weight.
That's
So,
mm,
like, no matter who her opponent is, they're going to be in a similar weight class.
Yeah.
And,
I'm just saying that she's tiny, not because I don't think boxers can be.
yeah,
You
but
don't
no,
uh,
that isn't the norm, right?
the
Like
stereotype that we
tiny, cute little blonde who's like funny and smart and spunky. And like,
right.
also, I'm a boxer. I started kickboxing and then I'm over here. It's like, but
Yeah.
no, that's very, very valid. I uh, dipped into Brazilian Jiu Jitsu for a second and it just was it's too intimate of a sport to be doing with a room full of cis men without it our gender constantly coming up, our sex, I suppose, more even more than our gender. Like no one's being a jerk, but
It just didn't work.
that's what
Yeah.
that's what turned me away from it. I'm like, this is I don't want to be thinking about this when I'm doing this, and that's what I keep thinking about. And this is okay. And everyone is okay. I gotta go. But like, it was hard to find opponents even in jujitsu, which doesn't need to be matched up quite as much with weight and size, but still finding people sometimes tall enough was a challenge. Like it was just, I'm a tall woman and a lot of fighters are the, the compact body type. They're just smaller, more efficient bodies that seem to just go forever. I'd be
Yeah.
so exhausted after like 10 minutes. This guy's twirling in the corner. I felt like I was like, okay, fine then. Kind of off of it, completely off the subject actually. But anyway, yes,
I feel
Kaytlin is
like,
adorable and also a boxer.
I mean, um, themes of gender and then also the causality of her going into fighting, which is this sort of, I would call it the concept of feminine rage, because I've heard people talk, I've have a friend who's brought that up
Yeah.
lately, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's an ever-present thing, feminine
Yeah.
rage. I wouldn't, having had a brother who did fight, I never took it up. It wasn't something that I desired to do, and I never would have thought of it the way she spoke about it, as a place where she went in and she was immediately taken seriously in that environment. And like, it was okay that she was there because she had rage that she wanted to process, and it was handled in a good way. Like, that's not what I would have expected to hear at all, which is really cool.
Oh, me too. Yeah. And I love this note. I also thought that that was one of the most interesting parts of the story, particularly because the feminine rage was in relationship to the passage of Fosta Sesta, which I also experienced a lot of, which every sex worker in like the world experienced rage about, because it created so many problems for our community and our industry. But like, um, to hear that like the way that sex workers are being treated like legislatively like and culturally was like part of this like rage that she experienced that she needed a channel somewhere, I thought was really really interesting because I feel like that was a lot of people's stories at that time, and like a lot of sex worker stories at that time, but also then like the pandemic and all of these things have created like so much like collective rage. There's a and Donald Trump, there's been like so many reasons to collectively like rage. And but she took it in this way that was like very healthy for her. And I thought that that was really interesting. Like a lot of us experienced that. I didn't take up boxing. I started a podcast. She did too, actually. But we both kind of started, like I started Peep Show and she started The Oldest Profession then, and I think that it's interesting how how strong emotions can shape our lives, because that's the story that you're getting from this. Like these strong emotions she was having like changed her life.
Yeah. And just, but also the concept that, so she created this outlet for herself, which was a healthy way for her to process, but fighting, or what some people perceive as physical violence, for others is also like a really unhealthy way to process their emotions.
Mhm.
So it's interesting to hear a woman speak about becoming physical when women are so often subdued, and finding that a healthy way to process, when a lot of men who seek physical ways to process anger, it usually goes in the opposite direction. Like, it's not necessarily a healthy way.
Well, here's another thing that she said that was like so rich and interesting that I've actually spent a lot of time mulling over since we talked to her, which is that like there's a way that like her kind of and I, as somebody who's like has a lot of submissive desires, as a femme who has a lot of submissive desires and who I totally related to what she was saying, which is that like that can become destructive in relationships with men who are attracted to that. That you can just reify, uh, you know, we talk about BDSM as being something that can be cathartic and all, and I think that that's absolutely true. We can also use that to like reify destructive gender norms and patterns and things, and that this is actually like it's interesting that she talked about this as pulling this out of the out of the bedroom, out of the sexual realm in this way, allowed her to experience the things that she wanted to experience without them being destructive. But it's like it became more violent for it to not be destructive. And that's interesting.
It's a very real theme in kink and in BDSM when you have these sort of desires and you want to be submissive or you kind of like want to experience pain. I mean, sexual sadomasochism is a very normal thing. I identify as a sadomasochist, but it's really important and in my community work and where I promote education to like if you want to do certain things, like if you want a roughhouse,
Mhm.
you need to learn how to take a punch. You need to learn how to spar
Yeah.
in like normal, healthy ways from people who are actually well educated in these areas so that you can understand what's the right way, what's the wrong way, what's crossing the line, what's taking it too far, what's causing permanent damage to your psyche and to your physical body.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think important. And I think that and and I mean, I want to say yes to everything that you just said, but also like it was interesting this notion of like taking a punch as something that like came up in the way that she talked about things as almost like transformative for her. In a way that like last week we were talking about when we were talking about Galen Grace, last week we were talking about the kind of transformative experience of like shifting consciousness through like psychedelics or something. It almost felt like it had the same sort of like it was the same sort of experience for Kaytlin to take a punch.
Mm-hmm. I mean, even in those episodes where we're talking about spirituality and Buddhism, the only time I've ever really studied Buddhism is when I did strongly identify as a submissive. And I was like at a point in my life where I was kind of revolutionizing or, trying to build on this concept of like accepting suffering in a way that wasn't detrimental to my body. And Buddhists are very much like about suffering and the evolution of suffering and how that affects you spiritually and takes you to another place. So like this, it all feels very like everything can change your perspective. Anything that you do can like, and learning and trying things and delving into something like boxing could teach you about find like why do I find joy in like the act of taking a punch? Does it make me feel strong? Does it make me feel like I've pushed past something that I was afraid of?
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that something really important to add to Kaytlin's just dimensionality. She's so incredible. She's also a historian, right? So, and there's also the aspect of she's experienced domestic violence. I think she addressed that a little bit in the podcast. So here is a person who is, uh, if you know history, pretty sure both of you are interested at least tangentially in that space, and like the she made a great comment in there. She said, yeah, if you know your history, you won't repeat it. Yeah, right. If you know your history, you get to watch everyone repeat it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you don't, but everyone around you does, society does. And it's like that rage, that you're describing. And there's just like frustration becomes a physical experience, and just I don't know about you, but every time I hear something in history, it's somebody who was born into a body like me was getting treated like a piece of cattle or a piece of property or, something somewhere along there. I know that women are not the only subjugated space, but, it's been like 5,000 years and like, it's still pretty bad for people born into these bodies globally. And like, knowing that history, right? And then just having it go essentially backwards is, I think, how the passing of that bill felt for a lot of sex workers. It felt like history took a step backwards. Like, wait, we're making this harder on people who choose this? What the hell? Like,
Yeah.
being a historian absolutely has to add just a damningly dangerous,
Yeah.
exponentialness of that anger, because it's just like, again,
Yeah.
again,
Well, also
like,
it makes you realize that, and I was thinking about this as she was talking, it also makes you recognize that things didn't just accidentally turn out that like women make less money in their jobs than men do.
yeah,
It, that
it
was,
wasn't skill based. It wasn't just cuz. It wasn't upsy. It was fucking planned every time, time after time after time after time. So we would get our asses back in there and make sure there was a fucking workforce. And it's some bullshit. It's some bullshit.
right.
Sorry.
I know. Yeah, no, I think that that's, recognizing that it's not an accident. It was created. It's this way by design. And the first time I remember, like, not the first time, but that always stands out to me when like criminal justice reform people will say like, the system is working exactly as it's working exactly as it's intended to work. So every time we're like the system is broken, we're like no, it's not broken. It's functioning
No.
exactly the way it's supposed to. The whole system needs to be thrown out, but it's not broken. You know,
Yeah. It's working great for the people who benefit from it. It's
uh,
working fantastically.
that,
Fully acknowledge, white person in the world, I've benefited from a lot of it. It's broken in racist ways too. But as a female bodied person, also experienced a lot of shit in there.
I just think it's important to recognize that like we're having these issues because we like it was decided that we would, and
Yeah.
so um that just increases the like anger that I have because it's one thing to be mad that like, I was pushed out of a philosophy program and that sucks, and it does, but like it's one thing to think that like it sucks that it ended up being like this, but it didn't end up being like that. It was
No, no, it did not.
yeah,
Of course it was going to be you.
right.
Like, in
Yeah.
the horror movies, it's usually the black guy. But like, right, you see a group of friends and like you watch enough horror movies, you're like, he's gonna be the first one to die. Like it just
Yeah.
you were
So
the girl in the room.
yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. So I have this like sort of personality where, and I think this is why I like this show or why I create. Speaking of like, you don't just happen upon things, you create. So I made a
The
show.
show that just showed up in our lives.
Exactly how I wanted it to. Um, I have a personality where I love hearing people talk about things that they're interested in, even if I have like no interest in them. And so every single person, I'm like last week we were talking about Galen. I'm like, I want to do tantric stuff. And then like I'm listening to Kaytlin and I'm like, I want to be a boxer. And then I'm like, no, I don't. I don't actually, but it's so hard for me not to pick up on that like vibe. When I hear people talk about things that have been transformative to them, I'm like, that's amazing. Like whatever it is.
And it makes sense that she would help you come to a point where you're like boiling down the concept for your show because her energy definitely gives direction in a way where like for me like I would also be the type of person who would be like oh maybe I want to box but when I step back and I listen to everything that she's saying it's like you said Emily you got like a little angry and said sorry like find joy in your feminine rage you deserve it.
Yeah, for real.
I think it was more like, sorry, that is not what this show is about. I am not going to continue. I'm just Emily. Another time. We can rant about that later. But no, I do. I find a lot of joy in it, and I pass it on to the younger generation every way that I can. I am raising a child for people who exists in this world because everyone just said, well, the female bodied person will do it,
Mhm.
and they were very much not cut out for that or knowledgeable about how to do it. So they're happy little asses in college, and we're all gonna figure this baby thing out. But like everyone, with the exception of their partner, my lovely nephew, everyone seemed to be really willing to just let their life be sacrificed.
Mhm.
I mean, they did it. Like, yeah, well,
There was two
as
people.
the outside perspective, not only were there two people biologically responsible, I can find six right now sitting in front of me. And then we can start counting their parents backwards because my kid didn't accidentally have one. So why did that happen? Why is this a surprise for everyone? You know, and to like start calling out my family on the podcast, but like I do. I find not only joy, I find very hardworking pettiness, but most importantly, just day to day passing on. Like, it's not a mistake. It is on purpose. You are right to be angry. How are you going to change it? What do you need to change it? Like, you know, whatever that looks like for them. But yeah, it's a very real part of my life all the time. My poor daughter, this is still tangential, but it's about feminism and sexism. I am a very capable human being. I did all the stuff. I fixed the cars and the house and the plumbing, and like did very typically male coded things. I speak up too much. I tell everyone what to do. I boss the men around. It was just, I was very much that. And my poor, sweet, amazing daughter came to me and she was like 17 or 18, somewhere around there. And she's like, do you know that sexism still exists? She had gone out and trying to get a job and was like, for the first time, rejected and given that in a setting that she just assumed she could walk into because and I hadn't shared a lot of those stories. I did hope that we would figure some shit out, and I didn't pound into her head the way that the world treated me badly. I just went out and did it anyway. Like, okay, well, that's your problem. I'm still doing this, and poor thing. I really wish we had figured it out by the time she was 17. I know that's a naive thought, but it would have been so great. But she was a little mad at me. She was like, it's still going on. I'm like, I know. I didn't bring it up enough.
I also wish it wasn't going on, but I do feel like comedy is a great way
Yeah.
to bring up
Right?
themes that make people feel uncomfortable, like this one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really, really true. Absolutely. Hey,
Yeah.
come here. I want to tell you something deeply uncomfortable. I'll make you laugh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's probably a good place to end on that. I have so much respect for comedians. I love them. I'm gonna go see my favorite comedian this month, who's Josh
Ooh,
Jones. Do you guys know who he is?
Yes.
I don't.
He's on the Daily Show now. He's young. He's like in his
Oh,
30s.
okay.
He's become very successful. There was just a Wired article about him this week that came out that said like because he made his fame like on TikTok and now he writes for the Daily Show. So it's like amazing. But he's this
Nice.
young nerdy black guy from Louisiana or something, like from poor like community. He did a very interesting show though that's on Peacock that you can watch that is like his 1 hour comedy special where he juxtaposes have you seen this, Milk?
Yes.
I love it. He juxtaposes his therapy sessions with what he's doing on stage. And this is like the best thing because he'll be like talking about something in therapy. You see him like sitting on a therapy couch and he's telling a story that's like tragic. And then it'll like cut over to him being on stage telling the same story that's funny
Yeah.
and going back and forth between those things. And it like kind of breaks down the
Nice.
wall of like, what is it that's comedy is doing? And like the kind of the upshot of this whole thing is like it saved his life.
Mhm.
Like because he came from very poor, very tragic like circumstances that then he like turned into this comedy career and he's going to be in he try I listened to his podcast. It's fun, but like he's going to be in Pittsburgh this in October and I'm going to go to that and I'm so excited about it because it's so interesting to me. But this whole therapy thing, that's kind of what like hooked me on him. I mean, he's good, he's funny like on its own, but this like way of deconstructing like what is it that comedy is? And how do we relate it to our own like trauma, which is what Kaytlin's doing in this show. Like I grew up with a
Right.
what she's saying is like I grew up with a war hero who was traumatized and died because of the work that he did. And I was a very early, not yet legal sex worker. And like, how do we make sense of these stories within the history of our culture?
Mhm. And you can keep this in or you can cut it out. But if you like his comedy, I don't know if you've watched it yet, but the show Kevin Can Go Fuck Himself.
What is that?
Okay.
So this, I think it's an AMC original, but okay, so like the AMC network is not having a lot of viewership. So they push some shows over to Netflix to try and like strum up some interest. And one of the shows is called Kevin Can Go Fuck Himself. And it is a split. Like, so the premise of the show is that it's just like any other um sitcom based on a main male character, and you see everything. There's fourth wall, you know what I mean? Like there's a laugh track, the lighting is kind of like skews towards the orange. The husband is an absolute imbecile, but it's like very early on into the show, and I can't remember the actress's name. She plays Alexis on Schitt's Creek.
Oh, I love her.
Oh, I
You see
love
that it's
her.
actually about her, and when she leaves a room or she's not with him, the fourth wall breaks, and you can actually see like how dingy and dark everything is, and like they develop the story so that you can see that she's actually in a relationship with a narcissist
Interesting. I have
and how
to,
he controls everyone around him. It's hard to watch. It's good though.
I'll watch that.
All
That's
right.
been that up on my list. Yeah. Okay, so if you haven't already, you should go listen to Kaytlin's episode. It's very, very interesting. I think that the way that she's weaving together like the history of women's subjugation and sex work and boxing and violence and BDSM and domestic violence and the military is a wild ride that you should go listen to.
Hard agree. And you just mentioned everything that she does. And I just have to say that I have a huge work crush on Kaytlin Bailey. And I do not mean that I have worked with her and I find her attractive. I mean, like the way that she does her work and produces things in the world and makes things, I have a huge crush on. And just, oh, I don't know, I'm just a sex worker and I run an incredible podcast and I'm also a historian. And then also, like, yeah, I kind of am into this BDSM thing. Oh, and I'm a boxer. Oh, and I have a touring worldwide show that talks about my generational trauma and the juxtaposition of history and women's rights. Anyway, what are you guys doing? It's like, oh,
I agree with you.
swimming, I guess.
The way that she obviously is so incredibly intelligent that she draws common threads through everything that she does that just pulls it all the way through, and you're like, she is so herself that
Mhm.
like she can't help but make art because it's just that life is
You,
art and she's sharing it with you.
Yeah.
you know how people say that like people have main character syndrome because they walk around like they're the main character, and it's just really irritating. And it's usually people who think that people should be paying attention to them. Okay, Kaytlin is actual main character energy. I watch the way she lives her life, and like you're saying, those common threads, and it's like you sit down and you're like, "Why are you having a pickle?" Well, there's just this
Main character energy.
I just want to read her life, just walking around, just like she's the main character in my life currently, apparently.
Love that for you.
Oh my goodness. Anyway, it's an amazing episode. Please check it out. I'm Emily Foster. This is When We're Not Hustling. Please like, subscribe, and share us.
And Melissa, do you want to?
So, and I'm Milk, and I'm happy to be here.